Christmas was soon to come, and I decided to get gifts for the rest of my family. To start things off, I decided to grab a gift for my little cousin, who isn't very hard to shop for, considering the fact that she's only 4, soon to be 5 in a few months. She likes a multitude of things, like Peppa Pig and My Little Pony, to name a few. But the one thing she liked more than anything in the world? Max and Ruby. Since she was the first one to shop for on my list, I figured a DVD of the show would be the perfect gift for her, since she watches the show religiously. However, while Christmas usually means a time to spend a few moments with the family, it also means that things in stores are either expensive as hell or sold out in a majority of places, which meant that I was stuck in a rut for a while. That was until later on. As a last-ditch attempt at finding a DVD for her, I decided to drive down to the local Goodwill to see if they had anything. I knew for a fact I couldn't trust what conditions the DVDs would be in, but by this point I was desperate. After walking over to where the DVDs were being kept, I finally caught my eyes on it. It was a Max and Ruby DVD, or what hardly resembled one anyway. The writing on the front cover seemed to be sloppy, almost harshly scribbled on, with poorly drawn depictions of the 2 rabbits on the bottom. On the back, there was a list of 4 episodes with extremely blunt titles, being named as follows: Episode 0001, Episode 0002, Episode 0003, and Episode 0004. The case itself felt like it was covered in numerous grease marks and stains, while the disc was just a blank, white DVD. I decided to buy it anyway, because even though it was most likely a bootleg with a homemade cover, I felt like my cousin would enjoy it regardless. Once I arrived home, I decided to clean the case a little bit before giving the disc's contents a watch over. The episodes all looked like they were TV recorded, but there weren't any major problems besides that. The only other thing I found odd was the episode selection screen. All it had to offer was a blank, white background with some weird rainbow gradient thing at the bottom. The episodes did have names, but they were all titled Max and Ruby, with the number being changed as the list went on. All to be expected from a bootleg. After thinking about it for a bit, I decided to change the cover to something a bit more friendly looking. I printed out several pieces of Max and Ruby promo art off of Google, and even tracked down the names of the episodes so they would be labeled correctly. The only thing I didn't change was the selection screen. I didn't think she would mind it all that much. When Christmas finally arrived, I gave my cousin the DVD I bought for her, and she seemed very grateful for it. However, my family was watching Christmas specials on TV, which meant she had to wait a while to watch it. On Boxing Day, my family had gone out for dinner, leaving me to watch over my cousin. I realized that now would be a good time to put on the DVD for her, considering she had yet to watch it, so I put it in and let it play while I cooked my dinner. From what I overheard, she had watched the first 3 episodes on the disc. It wasn't until I almost finished eating that I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from the living room. I made a beeline for the living room, only to see my cousin curled up in a fetal position on the floor, screaming and begging for me to turn it off. I looked up at the TV, only to be met with distorted imagery of what my cousin had come to know and love. It must have stayed on screen for God knows how long before my brain kicked in and shut the damn thing off. I tried calming my cousin down, reassuring her that maybe she just had a nightmare. A few days later, my family called me to say that they would be out all night for New Year's, which gave me a good opportunity to investigate the contents of the DVD further. I didn't mention what had gone down earlier, as I feel like I would sound crazy had I explained to them what my cousin and I had seen. As soon as they hung up, I located the DVD and put the disc into my laptop, plugging in some earphones I had lying around so my cousin could sleep peacefully without hearing anything. When the main menu appeared, I noticed that Max and Ruby 4 had changed, now reading, "In loving memory." I pressed play and watched the episode unfold. It started with one of those curriculum boards that would play before an episode of whatever show Nick Jr. had on would start. This one showed that Max and Ruby would inform its audience on understanding and recognizing other people's feelings. This stayed on screen longer than it was supposed to. That was when I came face to face with it. The thing that scared the daylights out of my cousin days ago sat right in front of me. Everything was covered in a horrible mixture of red, white, and black. Max and Ruby themselves fared no better. Their facial features were entirely gone, leaving only 2 large holes in place of where their eyes should have been. The information about the show and the Nick Jr. logo had disappeared too, replaced with 2 bits of text. One garbled to all hell, and another that read a single word. Leave. A loud, distorted mess of noise flooded my speakers, to the point where it made my ears ring and made me turn my volume down. A few more seconds of the screen ensued, before it all faded to black. Cue the intro, which had been altered completely. Max and Ruby had been removed from every single frame. The theme song had been slowed down and reversed, and every room in the house looked completely abandoned. Sounds akin to crying and mumbling could be heard in the background as it went on. At one point, there was one scene that I had never seen before. It was a garage, with the door leading to the driveway outside being wide open, and a shattered bottle of alcohol and a lighter laid on the asphalt. Text showed up on the top left corner of the screen. Why are you here? Who do you think you are? When it reached the end where the siblings waved out the window, they weren't there as expected. The logo didn't even appear either. The sky was this dark red color, almost resembling smoke and flames. I felt unnerved by this, confused as to what the hell I was even looking at, but I wanted to know what was going on. If my memory serves me well, an episode of Max and Ruby would have 3 short little stories, but this episode only had 1. It started off normal, with Max and Ruby playing tag in the garden, while their parents stood on the porch watching them. The parents' faces looked forlorn, and a distorted piano piece played in the background. The parents soon walked back inside and began to converse with each other. The 2 bunnies stopped playing and began to listen in on the conversation. Their voices were muffled to the point where I could hardly make out what they were even saying. The talking dissolved into yelling, then screaming rants, followed by something being thrown and shattered on the ground, before finally ending on one of them angrily storming out of the room. Ruby's eyes welled up with tears, while Max covered his face with his hands. The screen cut to white for a split second, before showing the house's exterior, the sky still a dark red. The sound of a door opening could be heard, followed by the sounds of footsteps walking through grass, before the scene changed again. It showed Max and Ruby standing in front of an unmarked grave. Wind could be heard blowing in the background. A few seconds later, the sound of a faint whispering would begin to get louder and more apparent as the scene went on. It all came to a complete stop when Max turned around and walked off screen, leading to Ruby looking up from the grave and following him. The The screen cut to Max standing in his room, a noose tied to the ceiling fan. He would bring a stool up to it before climbing up and bringing it around his neck. Almost immediately, the door to Max's room swung open as Ruby stepped in. She gasped, clearly shocked by the sight, leading to the first bit of dialogue since the argument from earlier. "Max, please, don't do this." In response, Max spoke his only line of dialogue in the entire episode. "Goodbye." "Wait, Max, no!" The silhouette of Max kicking the chair and going limp would be shown next to Ruby as she reached out for her little brother. The sound of choking could be heard as his body swung back and forth. Ruby's eyes went wide, her pupils shrunken. She soon let out a gut-wrenching scream, her eyes turning back to the gaping holes from earlier. She soon would run out of breath before beginning to cry. Her cries grew distorted and incomprehensible as the faint sound of static slowly got louder, with the screen slowly darkening as the static drowned out the sound of her cries. The screen returned to Ruby, alone in the garden, now next to 2 unmarked graves. She turned her head to look at the screen. Her eyes glowed blue, and she spoke. Not to me, but to someone else entirely. "You. Why are you still alive? I hoped you had died alone in that prison cell of yours by now. I couldn't deal with your horrid behavior anymore. All you ever fucking did was yell and scream and complain, even if I never did anything wrong. No matter what I did, you would somehow manage to make it a living hell for me. Sometimes, I could hear you and Mom talking. You said you'd quit drinking, but you never kept your promise, did you? Did you? You would crack open another bottle the very next day like the lazy piece of filth you are. Did you ever wonder why I hardly came out of my room that often? It was the only place I felt safe, because as soon as I'd walk out, you'd berate me for the simplest thing. You ruined our family, and you ruined my life. You ruined everything for me, everything I had hoped for, everything I had wanted in life, all gone. All because of you. I hope you're happy with yourself. I bet you enjoy watching me suffer, knowing I can never truly rest, even in death. I hope you burn in hell, you inconsiderate piece of shit." Ruby's speech would be cut short as it cut to the same garage seen in the intro. This time, the door slowly opened, revealing the charred corpse of Ruby laying on the pavement alongside the broken bottle and lighter. Her mouth was locked in an eternal scream, and chunks of her fur had been burnt away, revealing bone fragments and melted flesh. The sound of a woman screaming in agony could be heard as this repulsive image stayed on screen. The screams eventually stopped a few seconds later, breaths shortening to nothing. The screen would then fade to black as one last image faded onto screen. It was a frame of Max and Ruby, standing together in complete darkness. The two of them were completely faceless, much like how they were during the grave scene. Above the 2 rabbits was text that read, "I never loved you either. You only cared about yourself." After this, the screen would cut to black, and the episode finally ended. I ejected the disc from my laptop and put it back in the case. I sat there for a while, wondering what this all meant. After doing some research, I would come to find out that this was somehow linked back to a case from 2004, which was one of the saddest and most abhorrent things I have ever read. A 17-year-old named Amy Matthews would suffer mental decline from the constant verbal and physical abuse from her father. It eventually reached the point where she would commit suicide in the late hours of May 17th, by letting herself ablaze using her dad's lighter, breaking a bottle of the alcohol he would drink and letting its contents pour on her. That caused her skin to burn up even more. The police would later find her charred corpse lying in the driveway after one of the neighbors reported seeing her burn alive outside. Upon investigating further into the home, the authorities would find a journal she had kept with her. Every page of it was about things that were going on in her life, with the last several pages talking about the abuse she constantly dealt with. Her father would be arrested and sentenced to 15 to 20 years in prison. As soon as I finished reading this, I decided the first thing I would do tomorrow would be handing the DVD over to the authorities. The next few days went by. I gave the police the DVD, had a few nightmares about it, and my cousin went back home with the rest of my family. She didn't ask me about where the DVD was, meaning she probably forgot about it by now. It was late at night, and I was getting ready for bed. However, just when I was about to put my glasses on my nightstand, I thought to myself. That thought has stuck with me since. There are times where people cannot handle the pain they've been given. Sometimes, death is our only release.